There's something about the night that tugs at our deepest fears and fascinations, a time when shadows stretch longer, whispers carry further, and the line between reality and legend blurs. Across every culture, in every corner of the world, the darkness has spun tales that chill the spine and ignite the imagination. From ancient campfire stories to modern urban legends, the eternal night has always been a canvas for our darkest wonders and most haunting mysteries. Picture this, a single flickering candle casting wavering light on weathered pages, each one holding a secret older than memory itself. That's where our journey begins, with 30 captivating myths that have shaped how we see the night, each one more mesmerizing than the last. Why do these stories endure? Perhaps it's because the night is the one place where anything feels possible. When the sun vanishes, so too do the rules of the ordinary world. Creatures of folklore emerge, vengeful spirits, trickster demons, lost souls searching for redemption. Some myths warn us of dangers lurking just beyond the firelight, while others offer glimpses into realms where gods and monsters walk among us. These aren't just campfire tales, they're echoes of our deepest anxieties, our unanswered questions, and the mysteries that even the brightest daylight can't fully erase. So tonight, we're stepping into the shadows to uncover these legends one by one. Some will feel eerily familiar, like half-remembered dreams. Others will send a shiver down your spine as you realize how thin the veil between myth and reality truly is. By the time we're done, you'll never look at the night the same way again. The candlelight is waiting, let's begin. Long before streetlights pierced the darkness, the ancient Celts whispered of figures that moved just beyond the edge of vision, tall, faceless shapes that flickered like candle flames in the wind. These were the wandering shadows, being said to rise from the earth itself when the veil between worlds grew thin. Their legend stretches back to Samhain, the festival marking summer's end, when the Celts believed the dead could walk among the living. But these weren't just ghostly visitors. The shadows were something older, hungrier. Stories tell of travelers on lonely roads who felt an icy grip on their shoulders, only to turn and find nothing but a stretch of empty path until they vanished without a trace. What makes these tales so chilling isn't just their age, it's how they've refused to fade. In rural Ireland, even today, farmers speak of dark forms darting between hedgerows at twilight. Some claim they've seen silhouettes with no source, stretching impossibly long across fields despite no light to cast them. Others tell of a breathless silence that falls over the land when the shadows pass, as if even the wind holds its breath. Could these be remnants of ancient fear, or is there something deeper lurking in those mist-laden hills? The Celts left no written records, but their oral traditions paint a picture of creatures that don't just haunt the night, they own it. One particularly eerie account comes from County Kerry, where a shepherd in the 1970s described being followed home by a shadow that mimicked his movements, but with a delay, like an echo given form. By the time he reached his door, the figure had grown so tall it blotted out the moon. Such stories share uncanny details across centuries, the way these entities never speak, how they always seem to drift against the wind, and that unbearable cold that lingers long after they're gone. Modern paranormal investigators speculate about interdimensional beings or mass hallucinations, but perhaps the truth is simpler and far more unsettling. Maybe the wandering shadows were never myths at all. Maybe they've been here all along, waiting patiently in the corners of our world just beyond the firelight's reach. Thousands of years before Dracula became a household name, the ancient Babylonians were already recording nightmares. Their clay tablets tell of creatures far older than any European vampire. The Lilu and Lilitu, demons who thrived in the velvet blackness between sunset and dawn. These weren't just monsters, they were reflections of humanity's most primal fear, the vulnerability of sleep. Imagine lying in a dimly lit Babylonian house, hearing the wind rattle the reeds of the walls, when suddenly the air grows thick with the scent of damp earth. That's when they came the Lilu, male spirits with the wings of birds, and the Lilitu, their female counterparts, who slithered into rooms like smoke to steal breath from the lips of the sleeping. What makes these entities so fascinating isn't just their brutality, but their legacy. The earliest known references to them appear in the Ardat Lily incantation, tablets from 2,500 years before the Common Era, spells scribed in cuneiform to ward off their attacks. Unlike later vampires, these beings didn't simply drink blood. They fed on life force itself, leaving victims withered but alive, cursed to waste away slowly. Some tablets describe the Lilitu as seductresses who whispered into the ears of men, draining them drop by drop over months, while the Lilu preferred violent midnight assaults, pinning victims down with an unnatural strength. But here's where the story twists. These demons weren't just random predators, they were outcasts. Ancient texts hint that the first Lilitu was a winged goddess cast down for refusing to submit to the god's will, transforming her divine rage into eternal hunger. This detail echoes through later myths, from the Hebrew Lilith to the screech owls mentioned in the Bible's book of Isaiah. Even their methods persisted. Babylonian healers prescribed iron amulets and bowls of flour placed beneath beds to trap the demons, practices shockingly similar to vampire hunting kits of the 1800s. Perhaps most chilling are the personal accounts preserved on those clay tablets. One describes a merchant waking to find his entire household paralyzed, their chests rising and falling rapidly as invisible mouths pressed against their throats. Another tells of a child's sickness that baffled priests until they found tiny bruises hidden under its hair, the mark of a Lilitu's fingernails. These stories weren't entertainment, they were warnings etched into clay by hands that trembled as they wrote. Modern scholars debate whether these tales stemmed from sleep paralysis or early explanations for sudden infant death syndrome. But walk through the ruins of Babylon today as the sun dips below the ziggurats, and you might understand why these myths endured. The desert wind still sounds like whispering voices, and the shadows between the ancient bricks seem to move just a second too late to catch with your eyes. Some legends don't fade, they simply change shape, waiting for the next generation to rediscover them in the dark. In the silent heart of a Japanese winter, when snow blankets the earth so thickly it muffles even the sound of your own breath, that's when she appears, Yuki-onna, the snow woman. Her skin is pale as the moon on fresh powder, her kimono the flawless white of untouched drifts, and her eyes hold the endless cold of a frozen lake. To the woodcutters and travelers of old Edo, she was both a warning and a whisper of something far older than humanity itself. The earliest tales paint her as more than a ghost. She's the winter incarnate, a force of nature given form. On nights when the wind howls like a wounded animal, she glides between the trees, her bare feet leaving no prints. Some say she sings lullabies in a voice like cracking ice, luring the lost deeper into the forest. Others claim she simply watches, her breath curling in the air like mist until the moment a wanderer's strength falters. That's when her delicate hands, cold as December stones, brush their cheeks, freezing them where they stand. What makes Yuki-onna so haunting isn't just her cruelty, but her contradictions. Edo period woodblock prints often depict her as breathtakingly beautiful, with lips red as berries against snow-white skin. In one famous print by Utagawa Kuniyoshi, she hovers over a dying traveler, her expression caught between pity and hunger. This duality echoes through the stories. She might spare a young man for his innocence, only to return years later to claim him when he breaks his promise to never speak of her. She's a spirit of rules as much as revenge, bound by eerie codes that twist like winter branches. But beneath the folklore lies something darker. Scholars note how Yuki-onna's legends surged during the Little Ice Age, when Japan faced winters so brutal they birthed desperation. Frozen bodies found in the wild were blamed on her touch, giving shape to the terror of helplessness. Yet even today, hikers in Hokkaido's backcountry report fleeting glimpses of a woman in white standing knee-deep in snowdrifts, no footprints around her, her hair unmoved by the wind. Perhaps the most chilling detail comes from a 19th century account by a monk who claimed to have sheltered her during a blizzard. She warmed her hands by his fire without melting, then vanished at dawn, leaving only a single perfect snowflake on his hearth, one that never dissolved, not even in flame. It's these lingering traces that unsettle most, the sense that Yuki-onna isn't just a story, but a presence still waiting in the storm's eye, her secrets buried as deep as the oldest snowfall. There's a special kind of terror that comes not from the shadows around you, but from the ones inside your own mind. The Slavs knew this fear better than most, giving it a name that would echo through languages for centuries: Mara. Not just a demon, but the very essence of nightmares distilled into a being so visceral, her name became the root of the word nightmare itself. She didn't lurk in forests or abandoned castles. She waited in the one place no one could escape, the sanctum of sleep. Ancient Slavic villagers spoke of waking to an impossible weight on their chests, their limbs leaden, their screams trapped in their throats. In that suffocating darkness they'd see her, a gaunt figure with long, tangled hair, her fingers like cold twigs pressing down on their ribs. Some described her eyes as hollow pits, others as glowing embers, but all agreed on one thing: Mara didn't just visit dreams, she fed on them, gorging herself on fear until her victims woke gasping, their sheets soaked with sweat. Medieval chronicles from Kiev and Rus tell of entire families cursed by her attentions, their homes filled with the sound of choked whimpers night after night. What makes Mara so unsettling is how her legend mirrors modern sleep paralysis with eerie precision. Folk remedies from 12th century birch bark scrolls advise sleeping with iron needles under pillows or chalk circles drawn around beds, rituals startlingly similar to contemporary methods for grounding during episodes. A Novgorod merchant's diary from 1352 describes his wife's ordeal in chilling detail. She said the hag sat upon her, whispering of graves while the bed curtains stirred without wind. These accounts weren't mere superstition, they were attempts to explain a phenomenon that science wouldn't unravel for another 700 years. Yet Mara was more than a physiological explanation. She embodied the Slavic understanding of sleep as a liminal space where the soul wandered close to the spirit world. Protective charms against her often featured motifs of spinning and weaving, symbols of controlling fate's threads, because to the Slavs, a nightmare wasn't just bad luck. It was an actual assault by something older than churches, older than villages. Even the act of describing her was dangerous. Folklore warned that speaking Mara's name after dusk might invite her into your home. Modern researchers marvel at how her descriptions match sleep paralysis hallucinations across cultures, from the Newfoundland old hag to the Kanashibari of Japan. But in the remote villages of the Carpathians, some still hang horse skulls above their doors at night, just as their ancestors did. They'll tell you science explains the mechanics of nightmares, but not the presence that sometimes lingers in the room afterward. The scent of damp earth, the faint indent on the mattress where nothing visible sat. Mara may have given her name to a common phenomenon, but in the hushed hours before dawn, when the boundary between reality and dream frays, who's to say she was ever just a myth? Far across the frozen fjords of Scandinavia, where the northern lights twist like serpents in the sky, the dead were said to walk with purpose. The Norse didn't fear ordinary ghosts, they dreaded the Draugr. Corpses so swollen with rage and greed they burst from their grave mounds, their flesh blackened as if burned from within. These weren't mindless zombies, they were sentinels of the dark, guarding their burial hoards with supernatural strength. Picture a moonless night in Viking Age Norway, the air thick with the stench of rotting seaweed as something lumbers from a seaside barrow, its eyes glowing like damp coals. That's the Draugr, a creature that could crush a man's skull with one hand or curse an entire village by vomiting grave soil into their well. What makes these undead terrors unique is their grotesque physicality. Icelandic sagas describe them as impossibly heavy, their bodies swollen with corruption, yet capable of sliding through solid rock like mist. The Grettir saga tells of one Draugr who dragged entire cattle into his tomb, their bones later found stacked like firewood beside his treasure. But here's the chilling twist. These monsters weren't just guarding gold. They were jealous of the living, resentful of warmth and laughter. Some accounts speak of them sitting atop their burial mounds at midnight, methodically counting their stolen trinkets until some unlucky soul disturbed their counting. Meanwhile, half a world away in the Philippines, swaying coconut groves, another creature hunts without footsteps. The Aswang doesn't guard treasures, it craves something far more intimate. By day, it might wear the face of your neighbor, smiling as it sells you fruit at the market. By night, its legs split into spider-like limbs, its tongue uncoiling like a whip to lick the unborn from pregnant women's wombs. Unlike the Draugr's brute force, the Aswang thrives on deception. It's said they can transfer their essence into houseflies or black dogs, listening at windows before striking. Yet both creatures share an uncanny link to their environments. The Draugr's power stems from the earth itself. Graves built on ley lines or near the sea were thought to breed the fiercest revenants. Similarly, Aswang legends cluster near specific trees like the balit, believed to be portals to their spirit world. Both can be warded off by iron or salt, but here's where traditions diverge. Norse heroes might decapitate a Draugr and place its head between its knees to prevent resurrection, while Filipino shamans use blessed needles or ginger root to expose an Aswang's true form. Perhaps what's most fascinating is how these myths reflect cultural fears. The Draugr embodies Viking anxieties about dishonorable burial and greed's corruption. Their sagas often feature wealthy men returning as Draugr to punish kinsmen who skimped on funeral rites. The Aswang, conversely, mirrors societal fears of hidden predators. Its tales surged during Spanish colonization when the creature became a metaphor for unseen oppressors. Even today, Philippine hospitals sometimes hang stinging nettle over maternity wards, while Icelandic construction crews still occasionally redirect roads to avoid disturbing known Draugr mounds. The difference between them lingers in their hunger. A Draugr's wrath is cold and eternal, its tomb a frozen snapshot of mortal avarice. An Aswang's hunger is liquid, adaptive. It doesn't haunt places, it infiltrates lives. One is bound to the earth it once owned, the other thrives in the spaces between trust and suspicion. Yet both whisper the same warning: the night doesn't just conceal monsters. It transforms them. Somewhere in the misty hills of Ireland, when the wind carries the salt of the Atlantic and the peat fires burn low, that's when her voice rises, a sound like no other, a wail that freezes the blood. The Banshee doesn't stalk or hide, she announces. Her cries aren't just a warning of death, they're a lament for what's already been lost. A mourning that begins before the final breath is drawn. The earliest accounts paint her as one of the owls, the fairy folk who existed between worlds. But unlike her mischievous kin, the Banshee served a singular, solemn purpose. She appeared to old Gaelic families, particularly those with ancient surnames like O'Connor or O'Brien, her presence tied to bloodlines rather than places. Some saw her as an old woman with silver hair streaming like moonlight, washing blood-stained clothes in a river. Others described a young maiden with eyes red from weeping, her mouth open in an endless scream no living throat could produce. What makes her legend so chilling isn't just its consistency across centuries, but the eerie physicality of her visits. 19th-century newspapers documented entire villages shaken by her cries. The Cork Examiner in 1864 reported a night when every dog in Kilkee howled in unison moments before a local matriarch's sudden passing. In 1889, residents of County Meath described hearing a shriek so piercing it cracked window panes, only to learn a farmer's son had drowned in a nearby bog at that exact hour. These weren't whispered rumors, they were recorded events witnessed by dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. Yet the Banshee was rarely seen as malevolent. She was a harbinger, not a killer. Folklore insists she mourns those she heralds, her grief stretching back generations. Some say each wail contains the voices of every ancestor who came before, a chorus of loss echoing through time. In rare accounts, she even comforts, like the tale of a Connemara widow who heard soft keening outside her door the night her ailing husband passed, a sound she later swore was her own mother's voice, though the woman had been dead 20 years. Modern parapsychologists speculate these experiences might stem from infrasound frequencies below human hearing that can induce dread or visions. But stand in an Irish graveyard at midnight when the wind whistles through tilted Celtic crosses, and you might understand why science feels inadequate. The Banshee's power lies in her duality. She's both personal and universal, a private omen for one family yet heard by entire communities. Perhaps the most haunting detail comes from a handwritten diary found in a derelict Kerry cottage, its pages dated 1822. The author, a schoolmaster, described being awakened by a woman's sobs outside his window. When he rushed out, he found his young daughter sleepwalking toward the cliff's edge, guided, he claimed, by a pale hand on her shoulder that vanished when he shouted. The child remembered nothing, but days later, the man's brother drowned at sea. The diary's final entry reads, "She wasn't crying for him. She was crying for me because I would be the one left to mourn." That's the Banshee's true terror. She doesn't just predict death, she forces the living to confront the unbearable weight of memory, the knowledge that every love story ends in a lament. Even now, in Ireland's most rural corners, some still pause when the wind carries an unfamiliar cry, because the Banshee's gift is also her curse. No one who hears her ever forgets the sound. In the flickering lamplight of an ancient Persian birthing chamber, whispers rose like smoke, pleas to ward off a creature whose name was spoken only in terrified hush. The owl, a demon with skin the color of bruised, darkened plums, haunted the liminal space between life and death, drawn to the scent of blood and newborn cries. She wasn't just a monster, she was a manifestation of humanity's oldest terror, the fragility of beginnings. Zoroastrian texts from over 3,000 years ago describe her with chilling specificity: long, knotted fingers tipped with iron nails, breasts sagging from centuries of stolen milk, and teeth like rusted needles. Unlike other demons, the owl didn't merely kill, she corrupted. She'd slip into homes as a midwife's shadow, stealing the breath of infants or souring a mother's milk with her touch. Protective spells etched on clay tablets from Susa instruct women to bind their hair with 7 colored threads and place an iron knife beneath the birthing mat, a practice still followed in rural Azerbaijan today. What makes the owl myth so enduring is its terrifying intimacy. Persian miniature paintings show her crouching at the foot of beds, her mouth stretched unnaturally wide to swallow lullabies before they could reach a child's ears. Medieval physicians like Al-Razi wrote of mothers feverishly describing a blue hag moments before succumbing to childbed fever, long before medicine understood sepsis. Even the scent attributed to her, a mix of burnt copper and spoiled pomegranates, matches accounts of postpartum infections. Yet the owl wasn't invincible. Her weakness lay in her own grotesque nature. Fire scared her, not just because of its light, but because Zoroastrians viewed flames as sacred purifiers. Villagers would circle the homes of expectant mothers with torches, chanting verses from the Avesta. More curious were the doll traps, cloth figures stuffed with salt and turmeric left in doorways to trick the owl into attacking a decoy instead. Some legends claim if you caught her counting grains of salt, a compulsion tied to her chaotic nature, she'd vanish in a puff of saffron-scented smoke. In the mountains of Jilan province, elders still tell of a bride who outwitted the owl in the 1920s. Hearing scratches at her window during labor, she flung open the shutters to reveal not a demon, but her own reflection in a polished copper tray, a trick from her grandmother. The owl, confronted with her own hideous form, shrieked so loudly it woke the entire village. By dawn, the woman had safely delivered twins, and the window ledge bore claw marks so deep they're said to reappear every generation, as if the demon keeps checking back. Modern anthropologists note how owl stories peak during times of high maternal mortality, acting as both explanation and coping mechanism. But visit a Tehran maternity ward today, and you might spot an elderly relative slipping a tiny Nazar amulet into a bassinet when the nurses aren't looking, proof that some fears, like some protections, transcend the boundaries of time and science. The owl may be a myth, but the courage she inspired in those who defied her is as real as the first cry of a newborn in the dark. There's a place in the American Southwest where the wind carries whispers older than the red rock canyons themselves, where the boundary between human and beast isn't just crossed, it's unmade. The Navajo speak of them in hushed tones, if at all, the skinwalkers, shapeshifters who dance under the moon wearing stolen skins like cloaks. These aren't mere monsters, they're former healers who twisted sacred knowledge, trading compassion for the power to slither between forms. Imagine standing alone on the high desert at midnight when the coyotes begin to howl, except their cries sync too perfectly, forming words in a language you've never heard but somehow understand. That's when you know they're near. Traditional accounts describe rituals so taboo, even speaking of them risks attracting attention. Sand paintings normally used for healing are corrupted into patterns that pull the moon's light downward like liquid. Animal bones are arranged in spirals that mirror the Milky Way, a mockery of celestial order. Most chilling of all are the materials: wolf fur smeared with ashes from lightning-struck trees, obsidian knives sharpened with songs instead of stone, and above all, the skins themselves. Not just animal hides, but something more grotesque, stretched, twitching things that seem to breathe even when no one wears them. What sets skinwalkers apart from other shapeshifter myths is their intimate connection to place. Unlike European werewolves cursed by bites, these beings choose their path, often after years of secret initiation. Navajo elders, who rarely speak of them to outsiders, suggest the transformation starts internally long before the body follows, a gradual erosion of empathy that allows the practitioner to see living things as mere tools. The final step, murdering a close family member, an act that severs their last tie to humanity. Modern reports from the Four Corners region often share eerie consistencies. Truckers driving Highway 163 near Monument Valley tell of figures keeping pace with their rigs at impossible speeds, their limbs elongating like shadows at dusk. Ranchers find livestock with bones meticulously extracted through tiny wounds, as if removed by something with surgical precision and inhuman patience. Even skeptics pause when hearing the accounts of search and rescue teams who have pursued missing hikers, only to find their boots filled with warm sand and strands of fur too coarse for any local animal. The most disturbing detail lies in how these legends persist without the usual trappings of folklore. There are no heroic tales of defeating skinwalkers, only warnings to avoid their attention. Traditional protections include cedar ash sprinkled around hogans, but even these are said to merely irritate them, like swatting at flies. Perhaps that's the real horror, the sense that these beings aren't lurking in some mythic past, but operating just beyond the periphery of modern life, their rituals adapting as surely as the land's red dust settles on new construction sites and satellite dishes. One resounding thread ties all accounts together: the sound. Not the Hollywood screech of a monster, but something far subtler. The creak of joints moving in ways joints shouldn't. The wet click of a coyote's throat forming human words, or worst of all, the silence when every cricket and nightbird suddenly stops as if pressed mute. In a 2014 documentary, an anonymous Navajo elder summed it up best: "We don't fear them because they're powerful. We fear them because they remember what it was like to be us." That's the skinwalker's true power, not the ability to wear another skin, but the crushing realization that the line between monster and man was always thinner than the moon's edge on the horizon. On the roads of ancient Greece, when the moon hung low and the cicadas fell silent, travelers sometimes encountered a woman too beautiful to be real. Her skin glowed like polished marble in the moonlight, her laughter rang like chimes, but those who looked down saw the truth. One foot was human, soft and delicate. The other gleamed bronze, clinking against the stones with every step. This was Empusa, daughter of Hecate, a demon who didn't just kill her victims, she savored them drop by crimson drop. Empusa's origins tie her to some of Greece's oldest, darkest mysteries. Unlike other monsters born from gods or curses, she was crafted intentionally by Hecate, goddess of witchcraft, as a living weapon against the unfaithful. Classical texts describe her transformations: one moment a seductive maiden, the next a dog with eyes of smoldering sulfur, then a whirlwind of razored brass. But her most infamous guise was that of the lonely traveler, offering warmth and wine by roadside shrines. Those who accepted would soon feel their limbs grow heavy, their vision swimming, as Empusa's true face emerged, lips peeling back to reveal needle-thin metal teeth designed not for tearing but for precision. The philosopher Philostratus left the most chilling account in his Life of Apollonius, where he describes a bridegroom lured from his wedding feast by a woman whose breath smelled of honey and grave dirt. When the man's friends found him at dawn, his body lay drained yet eerily intact, 2 tiny puncture wounds at his wrist. The first recorded instance of what we'd now recognize as vampirism. This detail reveals Empusa's sinister innovation. She didn't just consume blood, she turned feeding into a ritual, leaving corpses too pristine to immediately suggest foul play. Modern scholars trace her bronze foot to an even older horror, the legend of the Kalakansaroi, subterranean demons who filed their limbs to points on a cosmic grindstone. But Empusa refined this brutality into something far more intimate. Vase paintings show her holding a cup rather than a blade, reflecting her role in Hecate's nocturnal rites. Followers of the goddess left libations at crossroads, and Empusa was said to collect them, not for the gods but for herself, mixing mortal blood with pomegranate wine in ceremonies that predated European vampire myths by millennia. What makes her story endure isn't just the gore, but the psychology behind it. Ancient Greek medical texts reveal a startling belief: that blood wasn't just life force but memory itself. Empusa didn't merely kill, she stole stories, absorbing victims' experiences into Hecate's shadow realm. This explains why her prey were often poets or merchants, carriers of tales. Even today, Cretan shepherds warn of a metallic clicking sound on windless nights, said to be Empusa searching for new stories to steal, her bronze foot tapping impatiently against the stones of roads long vanished. There's a reason the Manananggal is one of the few monsters that makes even seasoned horror fans shudder. It's not the fangs or the wings that unnerve most, but the grotesque precision of its transformation. Picture a moonlit night in the Philippine countryside. A beautiful woman smiles at you from the shadows, her lips dark as ripe guava. Then, with a sound like wet rope snapping, her torso detaches from her lower half, leaving legs standing eerily upright as her upper body ascends on leathery wings. This isn't just a vampire, it's a living, breathing anatomy lesson in terror. Colonial-era woodcuts from Spanish missionaries depict the Manananggal with chilling detail: ribs splayed like a gutted fish, intestines dangling like vines as she flies. These illustrations weren't just warnings, they were attempts to categorize something that defied European logic. Unlike Western vampires who drink blood through punctures, the Manananggal uses an elongated, proboscis-like tongue to siphon blood directly from a sleeping victim's heart. But here's what makes her uniquely horrifying: she doesn't just kill, she curates. Traditional tales speak of pregnant women waking to find their bellies mysteriously stitched up after an attack, the fetus removed with surgical neatness, a detail so ghastly it fueled 19th-century hysteria about Aswang epidemics. Modern Filipino horror films have amplified her legend, but the most unsettling versions remain rooted in folklore. In Tik-Tik, the Aswang Chronicles, the Manananggal's upper body slithers through narrow hut windows like a sentient snake, her spine audibly crackling as she moves. Real-world reports from rural areas still surface, like the 2016 case in Sorsogon, where a farmer claimed to find his wife's lower half standing in their kitchen at dawn, the torso missing until it came crashing through the roof at sunrise, reattaching with a sickening squelch. What makes this myth endure isn't just its shock value, but its symbolic weight. Scholars note how the Manananggal's split form mirrors the Philippines' own fractured history, colonized and divided, yet never fully conquered. Her aversion to garlic and salt, often placed in doorways, mirrors ancient Southeast Asian beliefs about purification, while her vulnerability to sunlight echoes the Spanish introduction of Christian iconography. Even her hunting method speaks volumes. She targets not just individuals but generations, favoring lineages to erase entire family histories. Perhaps the most haunting detail comes from a Tagalog elder's account in the 1930s. You'll know she's near when the geckos stop chirping. Not because they're scared, because they're listening. That's the true horror of the Manananggal. She doesn't just feed on flesh. She thrives in the silence between heartbeats, in the moment when the body forgets it's supposed to stay whole. High in the mist-cloaked valleys of Wales, where sudden storms roll down from Snowdonia like an angry tide, there walks a figure so ancient her name twists the tongue, Gerachwy Ribbon. More than just a spectre, she's a living barometer of doom, her tattered cloak flapping in winds that haven't yet reached the ground. Unlike banshees who mourn specific families, this hag of the mists wails for anyone unlucky enough to cross her path. Her cry, "Fire Machlenton, my child," isn't a lament for the dead, but a grotesque mockery of maternal grief, as if she's savoring the sorrow to come. 19th century Welsh newspapers brim with accounts of her appearances, each more chillingly consistent than the last. In 1873, villagers near Aberystwyth described a hunched figure scrambling along rooftops during a gale, her seaweed-like hair lashing at the slates as she shrieked. Minutes later, lightning struck the church spire, killing 3. What makes these tales so unsettling is their meteorological precision. She's never seen in calm weather, only when the air crackles with impending storm energy, lending credence to theories that she's not just predicting death but somehow conducting it. Folklorists speculate her origins may lie with pre-Christian wind deities, their benevolence warped over centuries into something malignant, but Gerachwy Ribbon's true horror lies in her physicality. While most death omens remain incorporeal, this crone leaves traces. 1892 court records from Bangor detail a fisherman who survived her onslaught by clinging to his boat's mast, only to find strands of blackened, salt-crusted hair tangled in the rigging come morning. Modern paranormal investigators still debate the infamous Pembroke sample, a clump of fibrous material collected from a farmhouse window in 1986 after a Gerach sighting. Lab tests revealed traces of keratin and an unknown organic compound that fluoresced under UV light, as if charged with static electricity. Her appearances follow eerie patterns. She's most often spotted near water bridges, docks, or the flood-prone valleys of the Teifi, but never crosses streams herself. Some say it's because running water disrupts her connection to the storm. Others whisper that the Gerach is bound to the land's oldest sorrows, her wails echoing the drowned villages submerged when reservoirs like Lyn Selen were created. There's a particularly haunting account from 1956, when construction workers dynamiting for the Tryweryn Dam reported a woman's screams cutting through the blast noise, though no civilians were within miles. That night, a landslide buried 7 men alive. What chills most isn't the Gerach herself, but how her legend forces us to reconsider nature's cruelty. Welsh poets like Dylan Thomas captured her essence without naming her, that moment when a squall turns unnaturally personal, when wind sounds like voices in your ear. Scientists might dismiss her as a combination of sleep paralysis and barometric pressure shifts, but stand on Pen Y Fan at twilight as storm clouds boil over the Brecon Beacons, and you'll understand why even atheist hikers suddenly check over their shoulders. The Jirachwai ribbon doesn't just herald death, she reminds us that the land itself has a memory and some storms aren't merely weather, they're reckonings. In recent years, a curious twist has emerged. Digital voice analysts studying purported Jirach recordings note her wail contains infrasound frequencies known to induce dread, the same vibrations emitted by tectonic stresses before earthquakes. Perhaps our ancestors weren't just spinning tales, perhaps they were encoding warnings in the only language that could survive centuries. A mother's cry twisted inside out, carried on winds that have whispered secrets since before wails had a name. The air in a Malay kampong grows unnaturally still just before she arrives. No rustle of banana leaves, no chirp of cicadas. That's when you'll hear it, the faint, melodic laughter of a woman, sweet as ripe langsat fruit. But there's something wrong with the sound. It's too high, too hollow, echoing as if bouncing off walls that aren't there. This is the Pontianak, a spirit with origins tangled in the roots of the region's oldest banyan trees. Unlike Western ghosts, she doesn't haunt places. She haunts relationships, her story a twisted reflection of childbirth's dual nature, life and death coiled together. Dutch colonial surgeons in the 1800s documented cases of women dying in labor, only for their bodies to vanish from locked hospital wards hours later. Villagers would later report seeing a pale figure cradling something wrapped in banana leaves near the riverbank, her nails blackened with dirt from clawing out of her own grave. Meanwhile, across the Bali Sea, another female entity takes to the night skies, but where the Pontianak mourns, the Layak feasts. Witnesses describe her as a floating head with organs trailing beneath like grotesque party streamers, her entrails glowing faintly as she hovers above crossroads. The Layak's origins are deeply tied to Balinese Hinduism's balance between light and dark. During Rangda dance performances where actors channel her spirit, the air itself seems to thicken. Dancers enter trances, their bodies contorting as if pulled by invisible strings, while the audience shivers despite the tropical heat. 19th century German anthropologist Walter Spies once recorded a performance where the Rangda dancer's mask couldn't be removed for 3 days, her skin beneath inexplicably cold to the touch. What makes these spirits fascinating isn't just their horror, but how colonial encounters shaped their legends. British rubber planters in Malaya spread tales of Pontianaks seducing lonely expatriates, playing on fears of the exotic East. Postcards from the 1920s even depicted them as beautiful vampires, a far cry from the gnarled, placenta-streaked creatures of Malay folklore. In contrast, Dutch officials in Bali tried suppressing Layak stories, only to have them flourish underground as acts of cultural resistance. This divergence birthed two distinct modern interpretations: the Pontianak as a tragic figure in Malaysian cinema, her stories often centering on unjust love, while the Layak became Bali's shadow counterpart to sacred barong dances, the necessary darkness that makes the light meaningful. Their methods reveal deeper cultural truths. The Pontianak kills with her elongated fingernails, tools associated with traditional Malay postpartum care, twisting nurturing into violence. The Layak prefers psychic attacks, her disembodied head symbolizing the dangers of unchecked intellect without spiritual grounding. Both are warded off by natural objects, Pontianaks by thorns placed above doorways echoing childbirth talismans, Layaks by intricate penja bamboo poles adorned with offerings. Perhaps the most striking difference lies in their relationship to modernity. Malaysian construction sites still report Pontianak sightings when old cemeteries are disturbed, her presence a reminder of respect for the land. In Bali, Layak stories surge during tourist booms, as if the spirit resists commercialization of sacred spaces. There's a chilling account from a Ubud hotel worker in 2019 who claimed to see a woman's head drifting through a yoga studio's glass wall. Mouth stretched in a scream no one heard. The same week developers bulldozed a centuries-old temple garden nearby. These spirits aren't just relics of superstition. They're living narratives evolving with each generation's anxieties. The Pontianak whispers of maternal sacrifices gone unrecognized, while the Layak's floating visage mocks humanity's illusion of control. One emerges from the Earth's secrets, the other from the mind's unlit corners, proof that some myths don't fade. They split open like fruit, revealing new horrors inside. Deep in the Appalachian twilight, where mist clings to the hollows like ghostly breath, the Cherokee elders still warn of an enemy no arrow can strike: the raven mocker. Unlike other spirits that howl or rattle chains, these beings hunt in perfect silence. Their name comes not from their own cries, but from the sound they steal, the ragged, gasping breaths of the dying. Imagine lying on your deathbed when the firelight suddenly dims, not from wind, but from something unseen perching on the roof beams. That's when you'd see them, two ember-bright points hovering in the dark, glowing hotter as they drink in your final moments. Ancient Cherokee scrolls describe these creatures as twisted parodies of their namesake. True ravens are messengers between worlds, but raven mockers slit that sacred connection. Their power lies in mimicry, not just of bird calls, but of human voices. Accounts from the 1800s tell of medicine men hearing a loved one's plea for help outside their door, only to find empty darkness and the next morning news of a neighbor's sudden passing. What makes them truly terrifying is their invisibility. Unlike European wraiths that leave frost or footprints, raven mockers move without disturbing a single blade of grass. The only signs are unnatural, flickering lights in empty cabins or the stench of charred meat where no fire burned. Modern paranormal investigators studying the koala boundary have recorded bizarre infrared anomalies, streaks of heat darting horizontally at chest height, as if something were running through the trees without touching the ground. One particularly chilling 2014 incident involved a hospice nurse who swore she saw a dying patient's breath visibly pulled toward the ceiling, forming a swirling pattern before vanishing, all while motion sensors registered zero movement in the room. Cherokee healers nod knowingly at such reports. They've long known raven mockers don't walk, they swim through the air, their bodies thinner than smoke but dense with stolen time. The most vivid descriptions come from those rare few who survived encounters. In 1932, a trapper named Elias Bowman described waking to find his cabin's walls glowing faintly red, revealing the outline of a hunched figure with wings like tattered blankets. But when he reached for his rifle, the vision dissolved along with his strength. For weeks afterward, he aged a decade in days, his hair whitening as the local medicine man whispered of missing days torn from his lifespan. This reveals the raven mocker's true horror. They don't just hasten death, they harvest it, stretching their own existence by pilfering years from others like black-feathered thieves in the night. What chills most isn't their cruelty, but their intelligence. Traditional protections, woven reed dream catchers, juniper smoke, work only if crafted with perfect intention. A single misplaced knot or wavering prayer creates a loophole they'll exploit. Modern elders speak of them adapting too, where once they avoided electric light, now they're said to ride power lines, their presence causing streetlights to buzz and dim over hospital districts. Perhaps that's why the old stories insist you'll never catch a raven mocker in the act, only the aftermath, when the fire dims for no reason and the air tastes like burnt copper, and somewhere in the pines, an ordinary raven watches you just a beat too long before spreading wings that cast shadows a fraction darker than they should be. In the peat-scented darkness of Hungary's Matras-Sentema marshes, the light would appear without warning, a single flame bobbing gently, beckoning the weary traveler with promises of warmth and shelter. But those who followed soon learned the terrible truth. This was no friendly lantern. This was the Lidayasi, a shape-shifting trickster whose candle wasn't just a lure, it was a living lie. 18th century court transcripts from peasant witch trials reveal just how cunning these creatures were. A shepherd named Janos Turek testified in 1793 that the light pulsed rhythmically, as if breathing with the marshes themselves, always hovering just beyond reach. When he finally caught up, the flame split into two, then four, surrounding him in a flickering square, a tactic described by 6 other witnesses across 50 years. The Ladayasi didn't just mimic fire, it played with it, twisting the very symbol of safety into a trap. What makes these accounts so chilling is their psychological precision. Unlike simple ghost lights, the Ladayasi adapted its deception to each victim. For lonely widows, it took the form of a lost lover's voice calling through the reeds. For drunkards, it became the glow of a phantom tavern. One particularly harrowing testimony from 1782 describes a miller's daughter seeing her drowned brother's face floating in the flame itself, his lips moving in silent pleading. By the time rescuers found her at dawn, she was waist-deep in bog water, still reaching for a light that had vanished hours earlier. But the Ladayasi wasn't content with mere drowning. Trial records speak of survivors cursed with an unshakable chill. No matter how close they sat to real hearts, they shivered as if frozen from within. Some developed photophobia, screaming at the touch of sunlight while craving the poisonous glow of the Ladayasi's flame. A village midwife's notes from 1761 described treating such a victim with hot paprika paste applied to the spine, claiming the creature's essence clung to the bones, like marsh gas in a drunkard's lungs. Modern folklorists note an eerie pattern in these stories. The Ladayasi's appearances spiked during the Little Ice Age, when crop failures drove desperate peasants into treacherous wetlands foraging for food. Its preferred hunting grounds, alkaline bogs where decomposing vegetation creates natural methane flares, suggest early recognition of will-o'-the-wisp phenomena. Yet the transcripts insist these lights moved with purpose, even intelligence. A 1745 case describes one leading a search party in circles for 3 nights, only to reveal their missing companion's corpse precisely where they'd first begun. Perhaps most disturbing is what the Ladayasi left behind. Several accounts mention finding small wax figurines at the scene, crude human shapes melted just enough to suggest facial expressions of terror. Chemical analysis conducted in 2012 on one such artifact from the Hungarian Ethnographic Museum detected traces of lard mixed with grave soil, a combination local Roma communities still use for protective charms. This duality, destroyer and creator, hints at older origins. Some scholars believe the Ladayasi descended from pre-Christian fire spirits, their benevolence curdled over centuries of hardship into something far more sinister. The trial records end with an unanswered question scribbled in the margin of Janos Turok's final testimony. Why does it need us? Maybe the answer lies in the way survivors describe the moment before succumbing. Not fear, but an overwhelming sense of being recognized, as if the light had been waiting specifically for them all along. Even now, on foggy autumn nights along the Tisa River, locals avoid unfamiliar lanterns because the worst part isn't the deception, it's the creeping suspicion that the Ladayasi doesn't just mimic desires. It remembers them generation after generation, lighting the same fatal path with infinite patience. There's a crossroads in central Mexico where the wind carries more than just dust, it carries whispers in a language no living tongue can fully pronounce. Meet the Cihuatateo, the spirits of Aztec women who died in childbirth, now transformed into skeletal warriors draped in the tattered remnants of their battle skirts. These weren't just ghosts, they were goddesses and terrors wrapped into one, their bony fingers clutching obsidian blades as they patrolled the night. Spanish friars in the 1500s wrote of hearing their wails echo through ruined temples, a sound like flint knives scraping across bone. The Cihuatateo's origins reveal a chilling duality in Aztec beliefs. Dying during childbirth was considered equivalent to falling in battle, granting these women the same honored afterlife as warriors, but their transition came at a cost. Every 52 days, coinciding with the sacred Tonalpohualli calendar, they descended to earth through the western sky, the direction of the setting sun and the realm of the dead. Colonial-era codices depict them with hollow eyes and gaping jaws, their once beautiful faces now frozen in eternal hunger. They didn't just wander aimlessly, they guarded specific crossroads, demanding offerings of tamales and pulque left on stone altars. What makes these spirits uniquely terrifying is how their worship persisted despite Spanish efforts to erase them. 16th century Inquisition records detail cases of indigenous women secretly placing cacao and feathers at intersections under new moon nights. One particularly vivid account from 1587 describes a priest finding tiny handprints burned into the cobblestones of a Mexico City alley, not child-sized but adult, with elongated fingers and claw-like nails. Modern archaeologists have discovered similar marks near former Aztec ceremonial sites, their chemical composition suggesting exposure to some form of ritual fire hotter than normal torch flames. Their methods of haunting carry disturbing symbolism. Unlike European ghosts that moan or rattle chains, the Cihuatateo attack through inversion of life's most sacred bonds. They're said to steal children not out of malice, but because they're desperate to complete the motherhood denied to them in life. Some legends tell of mothers waking to find their infants' cradles surrounded by tiny footprints in ash, the air smelling inexplicably of copal incense and copper. Other accounts describe them blessing newborns by tracing skeletal fingers across their faces, a touch that invariably brings fever and wasting sickness by dawn. Contemporary anthropologists note an eerie pattern in Cihuatateo sightings. They cluster near modern hospitals with high maternal mortality rates, as if drawn to echoes of their own tragedies. In 2011, nurses at a Puebla maternity ward reported seeing a figure in pre-Hispanic dress gliding through the neonatal unit during a blackout, only to vanish, leaving behind a single quail egg cradled in a bassinet. The egg, when examined, proved to be hollow, its contents somehow extracted without cracking the shell. Perhaps most unsettling is how these spirits blur the line between monster and saint. Rural communities still leave small offerings at certain intersections, especially around Dia de Muertos, not out of fear but respect, a recognition that some grief is too vast to ever fully rest. Walk those crossroads at midnight when the October wind carries the scent of marigolds, and you might hear it, the faint clatter of bone jewelry, the rustle of a feathered headdress moving against no breeze. The Cihuatateo don't just haunt, they remind us that even in death, some battles never end. There's a reason Highland shepherds still warn travelers about the dancing lights near Glencoe's abandoned bothies. Those flickering greens aren't will-o'-the-wisps. They're the hems of silk gowns swirling to music no mortal fiddle could play. Meet the Beobhan Sith, Scotland's most seductive predator, whose beauty is only matched by her cruelty. Unlike the brooding vampires of Eastern Europe, these creatures hunt in packs, their laughter tinkling like broken glass as they lure men into a waltz that never ends. The oldest accounts come from 17th century clan ballads passed down by traveling bards. One, titled The Bloody Reel of Glenfinnan, describes 4 hunters stumbling upon maidens in emerald dresses near a standing stone. Their gowns seemed stitched from forest shadows, shifting hues with every step. The invitation was irresistible, a dance beneath the stars, no partners needed. But by dawn's first light, rescuers found only 3 hunters. The 4th stood frozen mid-twirl, his boots fused to the earth by his own spilled blood, his face locked in an ecstatic grin. What makes the Beobhan Sith uniquely terrifying is how they weaponize hospitality. Highland culture prized generosity to strangers, and these vampires twisted that virtue into a trap. They never enter uninvited. Instead, they coax their prey into offering the first gesture, whether it's sharing a flask or accepting a dance. Modern folklorists note eerie parallels to predator courtship rituals. Their movements mimic the hypnotic sway of certain spiders luring insects into webs. 19th century tartan patterns hold hidden warnings. The diagonal lines in Clan MacLeod's hunting set, originally meant to symbolize crossed blades, a ward against the Beobhan Sith's hypnotic footwork. Even the color green carries significance. Traditional dye came from bracken fern, believed to repel spirits, yet the creatures adapt. A shepherd's diary from 1882 recounts seeing figures in modern riding habits near Inverness, their skirts suspiciously free of mud despite the rain-soaked moors. Their hunting methods reveal chilling precision. Victims rarely show puncture wounds, just 2 faint bruises at the neck, as if pressed by thumbs during an embrace. The real horror comes later, when survivors describe remembering the attack as the sweetest night of their lives, only to wake clutching handfuls of dead leaves where their partner should be. Some develop an aversion to music, particularly reels, collapsing at the first notes of a fiddle as if their bones remember what their mind can't fathom. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from an unexpected source: botany. Certain patches of highland grass grow unusually red-tipped despite poor soil. Tests in the 1990s revealed high concentrations of iron oxide, matching the mineral profile of dried blood. Local legends claim these are the Beobhen Sith's ballrooms, where the earth itself remembers the dances. Next time you hike the Cairngorms at twilight and hear laughter riding the wind, check your shadow. If it's moving a half beat behind you, don't turn around. Run, and whatever you do, don't tap your foot to the rhythm. In the hushed dimness of a yeshiva's study hall, where candlelight flickers across ancient leather-bound tomes, Kabbalists once spoke of a terror more intimate than any ghost or demon: the Dybbuk. Unlike spirits that merely haunt, this entity doesn't linger at the threshold. It invades, slipping into the human body like a hand into a glove, twisting the soul it displaces into a corner of its own mind. The most chilling accounts come from 17th-century exorcism manuscripts, where rabbis documented these midnight possessions with clinical precision, each case a battlefield where faith collided with something far older than scripture. One particularly vivid record from Prague in 1634 describes a merchant's daughter who awoke screaming in a language she'd never learned, her fingers carving Hebrew letters into her own arms. The exorcism lasted 9 nights, with 10 rabbis rotating shifts to recite psalms while the Dybbuk hissed through the girl's throat, recounting events from centuries past. What makes these texts so unsettling isn't just the descriptions of contorted limbs or guttural voices, it's the Dybbuk's knowledge. They often revealed secrets no living person could know, like the location of long-lost family heirlooms or unspoken shames buried generations deep. The Kabbalists saw these entities as lost souls refusing judgment, their desperation to remain among the living warping them into parasites. But here's where the lore twists: a Dybbuk didn't just possess randomly. Manuscripts from Safed emphasize how they targeted individuals with unresolved fractures in their spiritual armor, those nursing bitterness, hiding lies, or dangling between repentance and rebellion. A 1922 account from Warsaw tells of a Dybbuk who latched onto a Holocaust survivor mid-prayer, not through weakness but because her grief had become a door ajar. Exorcism rituals, or jarashin, were less about force than negotiation. Kabbalistic scrolls prescribe a hauntingly poetic method, wrapping the victim in a shroud like the dead, then surrounding them with 10 men holding Torah scrolls open to specific verses about liberation. The goal wasn't to destroy the Dybbuk, but to guide it toward the afterlife it fled. Some manuscripts even include dialogues where rabbis bargain with the entity, offering atonement in exchange for departure. A Breslov text from 1811 records a Dybbuk demanding its host complete a mitzvah it had neglected in life before it would leave, proof these spirits were as bound by divine law as the living. Modern psychiatry might dismiss these cases as dissociative identity disorder or trauma responses, but the eerie consistencies give pause. In 2008, a Jerusalem mental health clinic reported a patient speaking fluent medieval Aramaic during episodes despite no prior exposure. When researchers played recordings to linguistic historians, one phrase was identified as a merchant's plea from a 14th century genocide, a detail the patient couldn't have fabricated. Perhaps the most harrowing detail lies in the Dybbuk's preferred hour. Unlike demons who favor midnight, these entities often struck at Hatzot, the halakhic midnight when Jews traditionally mourn the temple's destruction. It's as if they sought bodies already aching with collective memory, vessels primed to hold their exile. Next time you hear an unfamiliar voice in a crowded synagogue or feel your spine stiffen during the Shema, remember, some doors aren't meant to be opened and some souls refuse to leave quietly. The Dybbuk doesn't just haunt houses, it havens in hearts. The jungle at night holds sounds meant to chill the blood, the howl of distant monkeys, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. But in the tangled canopy of the Philippines, there's one sound that stops even the most hardened hunters dead in their tracks: the piercing, perfectly helpless wail of a human infant. It's a sound designed to trigger instinct, to send a rescuer crashing through vines and thorns toward its source, and that's exactly what the Tiyanak counts on. This demon child of Filipino folklore isn't some mindless monster. It's a predator with a predator's patience, its tactics honed over centuries. Legends describe it appearing as a perfectly ordinary baby, left abandoned in a woven basket or nestled among tree roots, its cries calibrated to mimic genuine distress down to the hitched breaths between sobs. But bend closer to scoop it up and the illusion shatters. Its skin warps from soft pink to gnarled gray, its limbs twist with unnatural strength, and its mouth, now ringed with needle-sharp teeth, lets loose a screech that sends birds exploding from the treetops. 19th century Spanish missionaries wrote of entire search parties vanishing after following infant cries into the jungle, only to be found days later with their throats torn open and their arms cradling bundles of rotted leaves as if they were infants. What makes the Tiyanak particularly terrifying is its environment. Unlike haunted houses or graveyards with clear boundaries, this creature thrives in the living chaos of the rainforest. The shifting shadows and echoing acoustics turn the jungle itself into its accomplice. A cry that seems to come from ahead suddenly bounces off a kapok tree behind you. What sounds like a whimper from the ground might actually be trickling down from a branch 30 feet up, where the Tiyanak crouches like a spider monkey waiting to drop onto its prey. Modern audio engineers studying jungle soundscapes note how humidity and dense foliage can distort directionality, a phenomenon ancient Filipinos attributed to the creature's supernatural cunning. The most chilling accounts come from indigenous Ita hunters whose grandparents taught them to test any infant found alone by sprinkling salt around it. A real baby would cry at the irritation, but a Tiyanak would hiss and recoil, salt being a universal purifier in Philippine folklore. One elderly hunter from Mindoro recounted how his father once fire-hardened a coconut shell into a makeshift cradle, knowing the demon couldn't resist crawling inside. When morning came, the shell lay split open like a cracked egg, its interior streaked with blackened claw marks. Yet the Tiyanak isn't just a bogeyman. Its origins reveal deeper cultural wounds. Scholars trace its roots to pre-colonial beliefs about miscarried or stillborn souls denied proper burial rites, children trapped between worlds, their anger festering. Spanish colonizers later twisted this grief into something more monstrous, using Tiyanak tales to discourage indigenous mothers from leaving sick infants in the care of traditional healers. Even today, you'll find subtle variations in its portrayal. Rural communities describe it as a weeping, almost pitiable creature, while urban horror films depict it as a giggling, feral thing with glowing eyes. Perhaps the most unsettling detail comes from a 2012 incident in Quezon province. Hikers reported hearing a baby's cries near a landslide site where no children were missing. Rescuers found nothing, but their thermal cameras briefly registered a small, human-shaped heat signature curled in a strangler fig's hollow before it dissolved like mist. Whether illusion or something more, the jungle keeps its secrets, and high in the balete trees, where epiphytes twist into shapes that almost look like clutching hands, you might just hear a whimper carried on the wind. The question is, do you dare answer? The Arctic wind doesn't just howl, it carries warnings etched in ice and bone. For the Inuit, the rasping breath of the Kalupalik slithers through cracks in the sea ice, its clawed fingers ready to drag disobedient children into the freezing depths. But venture further east across the tundra, and the Sami people sing of a different terror in their yoiks. The lumbering Stallo, a hulking cannibal whose appetite for human flesh is matched only by his stupidity. These aren't just boogeymen, they're cultural mirrors reflecting two Arctic societies' deepest fears, carved into legend through generations of survival in the world's harshest landscape. Inuit parents still point to soapstone carvings depicting the Kalupalik's sinewy-form greenish skin stretched taut over protruding ribs, hair tangled with kelp, and an elongated jaw hinged like a seal's to swallow children whole. But what makes this creature truly unsettling isn't its appearance, it's its hunting method. The Kalupalik doesn't chase, it waits. Mothers warn children playing near ice cracks about the faint humming that precedes an attack, a sound mimicking the vibration of melting ice to lure the curious. 19th century Hudson Bay traders recorded an account from an Inuk elder who described finding a child's parka floating near a breathing hole, its hood stitched shut from the inside with sinew thread, a detail too specific to dismiss as mere fiction. Meanwhile, the Sami Stallo stomps through yoik songs with all the subtlety of a collapsing glacier. Towering over birch trees with a belly swollen from stolen meals, this oafish giant represents a different kind of threat, not stealth but brute force. Unlike the aquatic Kalupalik, the Stallo is land-bound, his clumsiness immortalized in stories where he mistakes his own reflection for a rival or gets tricked into eating heated stones. But beneath the dark humor lies genuine horror. Sami oral traditions describe entire reindeer herds vanishing, their bones later found stacked in caves slick with grease. A 1932 field recording from a Sami elder includes a yoik so unsettling it was banned from radio play, its guttural tones mimicking the Stallo's chewing sounds, complete with rhythmic snapping of imagined tendons. The contrast between these predators reveals profound cultural truths. The Kalupalik thrives in the Inuit's liquid world, a creature of shifting ice and hidden currents, embodying the ever-present danger of the unseen. Its victims are always children, reflecting communal anxieties about the next generation's survival. Conversely, the Stallo embodies Sami fears of the other. Historians note how descriptions of his reddish beard and clumsy violence mirror medieval Norse raiders who encroached on Sami land. His cannibalism isn't just monstrous, it's a perversion of the Sami's sacred relationship with reindeer, turning sustenance into sacrilege. Modern evidence blurs the line between myth and memory. In 2008, an Inuit fisherman near Igloolik captured sonar images of a humanoid shape darting beneath his boat, its proportions matching traditional Kalupalik carvings. And in 2019, Swedish archaeologists excavating a Sami sacrificial site found centuries-old bare bones arranged in a spiral pattern around a hearth with human tooth marks scoring the ribs. The Arctic has always been a place where reality bends under the weight of survival, where the cold can make you see things. Maybe that's why these stories endure, not as fairy tales, but as frozen fragments of ancestral warnings, whispering across the ice long after the storytellers are gone. Beneath the unrelenting Arabian sun, where heat shimmers distort the horizon into liquid gold, there exists a terror far older than Islam itself, the ghoul. Unlike the mindless zombies of modern fiction, these ancient shape-shifters were masters of psychological warfare, weaving illusions so precise they could turn the desert's cruelty into a weapon. Pre-Islamic poets wrote of them in terrified verse, their odes serving as both warning and memorial to those who vanished without a trace. Imagine staggering through the Rub al-Khali after days without water when suddenly a caravanserai appears, its lanterns flickering with promise, the scent of roasted lamb heavy in the air. That's the ghoul's masterpiece, a feast for the senses crafted from nothing but hunger and desperation. The oldest references appear in 6th century Malakat poetry, those legendary hanging odes displayed at Mecca's marketplace. Poet Tabata Sharon's verses describe stumbling upon an abandoned campsite where the ashes were still warm, the footprints leading not outward but in circles. His line, "The ghoul's laughter tasted of my own spit," hints at their most chilling trait. These beings didn't just mimic human habitats, they mirrored their victims' deepest needs. A 12th century manuscript from Damascus details how ghoul illusions adapted to their prey. For merchants, they recreated bustling market stalls filled with silk and spices that dissolved into sand when touched. For pilgrims, they manifested false mikats, sacred boundary markers, leading them astray from Mecca's true path. What makes these accounts uniquely terrifying is their consistency across centuries. 14th century geographer Al-Damashqi wrote of entire trade routes abandoned due to cities of whispers, phantom oases where voices called from empty wells. Modern archaeologists have found eerie corroboration. 19th century British explorer Bertram Thomas recorded compass failures near the empty quarters Wadi Dawasir, coinciding with Bedouin reports of structures that drank the moonlight. Satellite imaging in 2018 revealed strange geometric patterns in the desert floor, not natural formations, but the faint outlines of what might have been temporary shelters, their alignments matching no known nomadic camps. Yet the ghoul's greatest trick was its ability to evolve. Early Islamic scholars like Al-Jahiz classified them as jinn, capable of possessing the recently deceased to wear their faces. This explains the accounts of travelers recognizing lost companions in ghoul attacks, their smiles slightly too wide, their pupils refusing to contract in sunlight. A 19th century Ottoman tax collector's diary describes a desert well where skeletons sat propped in conversation, their jaws wired shut with gold thread, a gruesome parody of tea-drinking rituals. Forensic analysis in 2015 confirmed the thread matched payment records for a vanished caravan, suggesting the ghouls didn't just kill but staged tableaux to lure the next victims. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in the ghoul's linguistic legacy. The Arabic root ghwl means not just to distort but to spin, invoking their talent for twisting perception like yarn. Modern sleep paralysis researchers note how Saudi patients report ghoul attacks more than any other supernatural entity, often describing a figure crouched on their chest that shape shifts into familiar faces. This blurring of nightmare and folklore reveals the ghoul's true power. It wasn't just a desert predator, it was the embodiment of isolation's madness, the moment when thirst and heat make the mind turn against itself. So next time you see palm fronds swaying where no trees grow, or hear your name called in a voice you last heard at a funeral, remember the poet's warning: the ghoul doesn't create illusions. It simply shows you what you're already desperate to believe. In the flickering candlelight of a Joseon-era funeral procession, mourners would carefully avoid glancing at the burial shrouds for too long, not out of disrespect, but fear of spotting an unnatural bulge in the fabric where the deceased's face should be. This marked the presence of a Daljul Gwishin, Korea's most unsettling ghost, a faceless spirit shaped like a pale, swollen egg, its smooth surface reflecting the horrified expressions of those it haunted. Unlike traditional ghosts with recognizable features, these entities were blank slates of terror, their origins tied to Korea's unique views on unfinished destinies and the sanctity of facial identity. 14th century court paintings from the Goryeo dynasty depict these creatures hovering near improperly consecrated graves, their ovular forms disturbingly similar to the silk-wrapped funeral eggs used to cover corpses' faces. Historians note an eerie correlation between Daljul Gwishin sightings and the Confucian practice of gwansang, reading facial features to determine one's fortune. A person who died without fulfilling their predicted destiny was believed to return as this faceless horror, their erased features symbolizing a life's purpose wiped clean. The Annals of King Sejong contain a particularly chilling entry from 1432 describing a noblewoman's ghost appearing at dawn with no mouth to scream, no eyes to weep, only a faint indentation where her famed beauty mark once sat. Modern K-dramas like The Guest and Hotel del Luna have reimagined these ghosts with terrifying creativity. One memorable scene shows a Dalgyul sliding across a hospital floor, its surface warping to show reflections of victims' forgotten memories, a child's lost toy, a shattered wedding photo, before absorbing them into its blank expanse. But the most disturbing interpretations come from traditional folklore. Some tales describe them wearing stolen faces like masks, the features melting off after a few hours like wet calligraphy ink. Others tell of their ability to mimic voices perfectly. Exploiting Korea's elaborate honorific system, a Dalgyul might address an elderly scholar with flawless informal speech, revealing its inhuman nature through grammatical precision rather than error. The horror deepens when examining how these spirits communicate. Without mouths, they're said to speak through resonant vibrations, knocking sounds in walls, the hum of taut silk strings, even the sub-audible rumble of earthquakes. A 19th century shaman's diary from Jeju Island recounts an exorcism where a Dalgyul answered questions by making blood droplets dance in a bronze bowl, forming Hangul characters before dissolving. This ties to ancient Korean beliefs that sound itself carries spiritual weight, explaining why some Buddhist temples still keep face drums adorned with visages of the dead, their beats meant to guide lost features back to their owners. What makes these ghosts uniquely poignant is their connection to Korea's rapid modernization. During the Japanese occupation, many traditional burial mounds were destroyed, leading to a surge in Dalgyul sightings near construction sites. Faceless spirits wandering half-finished highways where ancestral graves once stood. Even today, Seoul's older taxi drivers whisper about picking up silent passengers whose reflections lack faces in the rearview mirror, only for them to vanish near demolished Hanok villages. Perhaps that's the true tragedy of the Dalgyul. They're not just monsters, but casualties of history itself, forever searching for the identities progress erased. Next time you watch a K-drama and see an extra lurking at the scene's edge with oddly blurred features, look closer. That slight shimmer around their outline might not be a production error, but a very deliberate warning, because in Korea, the most terrifying ghosts aren't the ones who show their faces. They're the ones who make you forget yours. Beneath the blood-red glow of a Transylvanian moon, when the Carpathian winds carry the scent of aged iron and damp earth, the forests stir with more than just wolves. This is the domain of the Paralysis, Romania's ancient werewolf judges, creatures as steeped in lore as they are in legend. Unlike the mindless beasts of Western folklore, these shapeshifters were once men of power, scholars and warriors who traded their humanity not for savagery, but for a darker purpose, to hunt the guilty under the celestial court of the blood moon. Their story intertwines with none other than Vlad Tepes himself, the real-life Dracula, who some whisper didn't just execute criminals but recruited them into a lupine legion. The earliest accounts come from crumbling Wallachian court documents, where the term Paralysis appears alongside descriptions of disappearances timed to lunar cycles. One parchment from 1462, bearing Vlad's wax seal, details the trial of a boyar accused of treason. The text breaks off mid-sentence, replaced by splatters of ink resembling paw prints, followed by a single phrase, "Let the red judge decide." Local folklore fills in the gaps. Those condemned by Vlad's standards but deemed too valuable to simply impale were said to undergo the wolf's baptism, forced to drink from a chalice filled with rainwater collected in the skull of a previous Paralysis. Survivors emerged changed, their bodies twisting under future full moons into instruments of vengeance. Modern visitors to Ponari Fortress, Vlad's mountaintop stronghold, often report an uncanny phenomenon. On nights when the moon hangs particularly low, The castle's broken battlements cast shadows that don't match their structure, elongated, hunched shapes that seem to pace the cliffs. Infrared cameras have captured unexplained heat signatures moving between the trees below, their patterns too deliberate for wildlife. Historians note the fort's strategic position overlooks the old Road of the Condemned, where prisoners were marched to their fate. Could these spectral shapes be echoes of the Paralysis patrols, eternally bound to guard the borders of their ruthless maker's kingdom? What chills most isn't the transformation itself, but its twisted legality. Romanian village elders still speak of the wolf trials ceremonies where accused criminals were tied to oak trees on blood moon nights. If they survived until dawn, they were deemed innocent. None ever did. Forensic archaeologists excavating these sites found bones with grooves inconsistent with animal teeth, marks suggesting deliberate, almost surgical removal of flesh. The Paralysis didn't just kill, they executed, their attacks mirroring Vlad's infamous punishments. A shepherd in the Fagaras Mountains once described finding a poacher's body in the 1980s, impaled on a broken pine branch with wolf tracks circling the site, their depth indicating a creature walking upright on two legs. The Paralysis legacy lingers in unexpected ways. During World War II, German soldiers occupying Bran Castle reported being stalked by giant wolves that ignored gunfire incidents so frequent the Wehrmacht assigned occult specialists to investigate. More recently, a 2016 bioacoustic study in the Retezat Mountains recorded howls containing vocal patterns eerily similar to Old Church Slavonic, a language dead for centuries. The researchers' notes speculate, it's as if something is trying to speak through them, not words but verdicts. Stand in the courtyard of Corvin Castle at midnight when the moon turns copper, and you might hear it, the rhythmic scrape of claws on stone, a sound that doesn't fade but grows clearer, as if approaching from all directions at once. The Paralysis weren't just monsters, they were the law made flesh, fangs and fur, a reminder that in the shadows of history, justice and horror sometimes wear the same snarling face. In the thick sugarcane fields of Haiti, where the tropical night hums with the sound of cicadas and distant drumbeats, there exists a secret so terrifying it blurred the line between myth and reality. The legend of the Bizango societies and their infamous zombie slaves. This wasn't just folklore. It was a documented phenomenon, one that shook the foundations of Western anthropology when ethnographers in the 1930s uncovered evidence of real men and women stripped of their will, forced into a waking death. Among them, a Harvard researcher named Zora Neale Hurston stumbled upon a case that would haunt her for life, a woman named Felicia Felix Mentor, who walked out of the jungle after being declared dead years earlier, her eyes vacant, her voice gone, her body moving as if pulled by invisible strings. The Bizango societies operated in the shadows of Haiti's post-revolutionary era, their rituals a dark mirror to the island's fight for freedom. By day, their members might be farmers, shopkeepers, even policemen. But under the cover of new moon darkness, they gathered in hidden peristyles, their faces masked by carved wooden visages, their ceremonies fueled by a potent mix of powdered pufferfish toxin and sacred herbs. The science behind their methods is as chilling as the myths. Tetrodotoxin, found in blowfish, can induce a paralysis so profound it mimics death, slowing the heartbeat to a whisper, locking victims inside their own bodies while fully conscious. When administered with precision, it allowed Bizango priests to bury someone alive, only to resurrect them days later, their minds shattered by the trauma. Hurston's notes from 1936 describe digging through graveyard records in Port-au-Prince, tracking cases where corpses vanished from sealed coffins. One account detailed a man found wandering near Cap Haitian, his fingertips worn to the bone from clawing at his coffin lid. But the horror didn't end with the physical. Survivors spoke of being bound by invisible forces, compelled to obey commands without understanding why. Modern neuroscientists suggest this might involve a cocktail of psychoactive plants like datura, which disrupts memory formation combined with relentless psychological conditioning. Victims weren't just poisoned, they were unmade, their identities dissolved through rituals that blended voodoo mysticism with brutal psychology. What makes the Bizango different from fictional zombies is their terrifying purpose. These weren't mindless hordes, they were targeted weapons. Land disputes, blood feuds, or political rivals could all end with someone waking up in a cane field, their free will extracted like a rotten tooth. A 1947 Haitian police report mentions a plantation owner found with a Bizango pouch stitched into his suit lining, containing grave dirt and nail clippings from 7 missing laborers. The most disturbing detail, when confronted, he smiled and said, "They work harder now." Today, the rumors persist. Near the ruins of San Sausai Palace, locals still whisper about the night farmers, figures seen herding listless workers through moonlit fields, their movements too synchronized, their silence too complete. Whether myth or malignancy, the legacy of the Bizango lingers, a reminder that some slaveries don't need chains. They need only the right poison, the right prayer, and the cover of endless night. The waters of the Cayo Freya River flow murky and heavy with secrets, but beneath its surface swirls a darker current, one thick with the restless souls of the Phi Tai Hong. These aren't just ordinary ghosts, they're the waterlogged dead, victims of violent ends whose bloated bodies were never given proper rites. By day, Bangkok's iconic river bustles with long-tail boats and floating markets. But when twilight paints the temples gold, locals steer clear of certain bends where the water ripples against no wind, where faint handprints sometimes bloom on boat hulls like mold. Ancient Wat Arun murals tell their story in vivid, unsettling detail. One panel shows a drowned woman floating upright, her hair fanning like black seaweed, her neck bent at an impossible angle, the telltale mark of a hanging. Another depicts fishermen pulling nets full of bones that melt into lotus roots by dawn. These images aren't mere superstition, they're rooted in centuries of tragic history. The river was once the kingdom's preferred execution ground, swallowing prisoners, adulterers, and political dissidents alike. Thai folklore insists those denied cremation linger as Phi Tai Hong, their spirits trapped in a grotesque parody of their death. The suicide drowns endlessly, the beheaded searches for his skull, the poisoned vomits black water that kills anyone who steps in it. Modern Bangkok has turned this terror into theater, but with a twist. Tourists flock to ghost boat reenactments along the Cayo Freya, where actors drenched in phosphorescent paint reenact drownings. What few realize is how meticulously these performances mirror actual sightings. A 2019 YouTube clip from a late-night ferry shows a figure bobbing vertically near Rama Roman 8 bridge until it suddenly walks up the riverbank, leaving no wet footprints. Forensic analysis confirmed the video wasn't doctored, though skeptics blame river debris and low light. The most chilling accounts come from the river's dredgers. In 2021, workers near Thornbury reported machinery clogged with masses of hair that dissolved when touched. Lab tests revealed keratin strands with no DNA match in any database, just traces of century-old betel nut residue, a chewing habit long faded from practice. Even more unsettling are the echo drownings, cases where someone perishes in the exact spot as a historical victim, despite no prior knowledge. A 2016 police report documents a French tourist who, during a midnight swim, began screaming in flawless archaic Thai before vanishing beneath the waves. His body surfaced 3 days later wearing a silk waistcloth not sold in any modern market. Perhaps the Phi Tai Hong's true power lies in their persistence. While most ghosts fade when forgotten, these spirits grow stronger with each retelling, fed by the collective dread of millions who cross the river daily. Monks at Wat Rakhang still chant over bundles of folded banana leaves weighted with stones, releasing them as surrogate bodies for the uncremated. Sometimes the leaves drift normally. Other times they're pulled under with unnatural force. The river keeps its secrets, and somewhere in its depths the Phi Tai Hong continue their endless vigil, waiting for the next soul reckless enough to mistake flowing water for something harmless. The icy waters of the Baltic have always held mysteries darker than their depths, none more terrifying than iku-turso, the Lovecraftian horror lurking in Finland's Kalevala epics. Unlike sleek sea serpents or romanticized mermaids, this abomination defies nature's logic. Ancient rune singers described it as a mass of writhing tentacles crowned with a mouthless, eyeless head, its skin bubbling like tar left too long in the sun. But here's what chills most. Iku-turso wasn't just a monster. It was a weapon summoned by the witch Lau-hai to tear apart the hero Väinämöinen's magical ship. 18th century woodcuts from Turku depict the creature rising from waves thick with human teeth, believed to be votive offerings from fishermen desperate to appease it. Modern marine biologists note how these descriptions eerily mirror deep-sea cephalopods, species unknown to surface dwellers until the 19th century. Was iku-turso a case of myth predicting science, or something far older lurking in the Baltic's unseen trenches? Now cross the Gulf of Finland to Estonia's snowy farmsteads, where the krat offers a different kind of terror. This was no natural beast, but a cobbled-together abomination born of greed. Picture a peasant kneeling at midnight in his barn, stitching a demon into existence from hay, old tools, and 3 drops of his own blood. The krat's creation required blasphemy, stealing the church's holy hinges or forging a contract signed with the devil's fingernail. Once animated, it resembled a spindly, oversized scarecrow, its hollow chest cavity swallowing stolen grain or coin. But the krat was no obedient slave. Folk tales warn it would grow restless without constant tasks, turning on its maker if idle. A 19th century court transcript from Viljandi recounts a farmer found trampled to death by his own plow horse, the animal's hooves crusted with straw not from its bedding but from the shredded remains of a krat gone rogue. What makes these creatures fascinating is how they mirror their culture's deepest anxieties. Iku-turso embodies Finland's primal fear of the sea's unfathomable hunger. Its tentacles symbolize the inescapable pull of drowning, the way cold water numbs limbs before dragging victims down. Estonian krat legends, meanwhile, expose the dark side of ingenuity. These constructs reflect peasant resentment toward feudal lords, the very tools used to build krat scythes, rakes becoming instruments of revolt against oppression. Even their weaknesses reveal cultural truths. Iku-turso could be banished by singing the origins of fire and iron, Finland's twin pillars of survival. The krat, conversely, was undone by trivialities, asking it to carry water in a sieve or count grains of sand, exploits exposing its hollow, mechanistic nature. Artifacts bring these myths into startling reality. The National Museum of Finland displays a 13th century fisherman's amulet, a twisted piece of driftwood wrapped in kelp, believed to be a miniature iku-turso kept as both warning and ward. In Tallinn's folklore archives, you'll find krat contracts written in backward Latin on birch bark, their edges charred as if held to a flame that refused to burn them. The most unsettling evidence comes from coastal Estonia, where 19th century farmers buried headless mannequins at property boundaries. Archaeologists initially assumed these were scarecrows until carbon dating revealed human blood residues on the straw stuffing, a grim nod to the krat's creation ritual. Modern encounters blur the line between superstition and something stranger. In 2017, a Finnish icebreaker in the Bothnian Bay captured sonar images of a massive, amorphous shape moving against deep currents. Marine experts dismissed it as a thermal inversion until the same crew reported their equipment failing while a chorus of clicking sounds, eerily similar to the Kalevala's description of iku-turso's bone-rattling laughter, echoed through the hull. Meanwhile, Estonian tech startups jokingly refer to malfunctioning AI as digital krat, unaware of how close they tread to the original horror. A 2021 incident at a tattoo robotics lab saw a prototype agrarian bot rearrange its own circuitry into patterns matching ancient ward runes after engineers jokingly input a folk chant as its activation code. Perhaps these creatures endure because they represent two sides of humanity's Faustian bargain with power. Iku-turso is the untamed fury of nature we pretend to master until it surges back. The krat is the invention that outlives its purpose, turning the tools of survival into instruments of self-destruction. The Baltic's waves still whisper warnings to those who listen not in words, but in the creak of ships' timbers straining against the deep, and the dry rustle of straw in abandoned barns stirred by no visible wind. Deep in the Mongolian taiga, where the larch trees grow so close their branches weave a second sky, there's a sound no hunter fears more than the creaking of wood at midnight, not from wind, but from something moving in the canopy. This is the domain of the Shurul, a spirit born from the unimaginable grief of women who died in childbirth or miscarriage, their souls twisted by injustice into something ravenous. Unlike the ghostly brides of other cultures, the Shurul doesn't haunt graves or crossroads. She perches, her elongated limbs and backwards-facing feet designed for life among the branches, her hair matted with sap and old blood. When she descends, it's not with a wail but with a whisper, the sound of bark splitting under invisible claws, the scent of crushed juniper berries masking the rot beneath. Ancient shamanic scrolls from the Yuan dynasty depict her in startling detail, ribs protruding like a starved wolf's, breasts swollen with poisoned milk, and a mouth stretched far too wide to be human. But it's her hunting method that chills to the bone. She doesn't attack outright, she seduces. Mongolian herders still warn of a beautiful face glimpsed through the leaves at dusk, lips stained red with seabuckthorn, singing lullabies in a voice identical to the listener's lost love. Those who follow her into the trees never return the same. 18th century medical texts from Urga describe men found days later, their beards turned white, their muscles withered as if aged decades in hours. The shamans called it the hollowing. The Shurul didn't just drink blood, she siphoned life force itself, leaving her victims alive just long enough to stagger home and spread the curse to their families. What makes the Shurul legend so visceral is its connection to real rituals. Shamans of the Dark Hat tribe still perform midnight ceremonies with horsehead fiddles, their bows strung with human hair to mimic the Shurul's hunting grounds. Drum animations used in these rituals show her as a shadow puppet, elongated fingers snatching at floating orbs representing souls, her tree root legs twisting into sacred symbols for protection. Modern ethnographers note how these performances align with sleep paralysis accounts, the backwards feet mirroring the brain's confusion during REM, the tree dwelling reflecting primal fears of predators lurking above. But there's a darker thread here too. The Shurul wasn't just a monster, she was a warning. Mongolian law codes from Genghis Khan's era mandated proper burial rites for stillborn children, lest their mothers return as root walkers. A 19th century Russian explorer's diary recounts finding an entire forest near Kurvsgirl Lake where trees bore deep gashes at chest height, not from axes, but from countless knives scoring protective runes into the bark. The most chilling evidence comes from an unexpected source, the fossil record. In 2014, archaeologists excavating a Xiongnu-era burial mound discovered the skeleton of a young woman wedged vertically between two pine trunks, her bones fused to the wood by centuries of growth. The remains showed signs of a traumatic pregnancy, but what unsettled researchers was the burial's precision. Her feet had been deliberately broken and twisted backwards before interment, exactly like the Shurul's described form. Nearby lay the mummified remains of 7 men, their ribcage caved in as if vacuum sealed from within. Carbon dating revealed they died over a span of 300 years, each placed there during different eras. Was this a shrine to appease something, or proof the Shurul's curse outlived generations? Today, the taiga holds its secrets tight. Locals tie blue silk ribbons around large trees not for decoration, but to tangle the shural's fingers should she try to descend. Late-night hikers sometimes report a sensation like cobwebs brushing their faces, though no spider webs exist at that altitude. And once in a while, when the wind dies and the campfire burns low, you might hear a creaking branch just a little too rhythmic, a little too intentional, as if something up there is shifting its weight, waiting for you to look up. The shural doesn't rush. She knows all men eventually tilt their heads back toward the trees, drawn by the same instinct that makes us search for faces in the dark. And by then, of course, it's already too late. In the glow of computer screens and the hum of late-night Wi-Fi, a new breed of myth was born, one that didn't emerge from ancient forests or forgotten graves, but from the collective imagination of the internet. The Slender Man isn't just a modern boogeyman. He's a digital age incarnation of the eternal night's oldest fears, proof that even in an era of streetlights and smartphones, the shadows still find ways to whisper. His origin story reads like folklore for the 21st century, a Photoshop contest on a creepypasta forum in 2009 where users competed to create paranormal images. What began as a fictional exercise quickly metastasized into something far darker, blurring the line between fiction and belief in ways that would make even the Brothers Grimm shudder. Early forum threads show the myth evolving in real time. One particularly eerie screenshot from the Something Awful forums depicts a user describing their friend's encounter with a tall, faceless figure in a business suit, arms elongating like taffy, standing motionless at the edge of a playground at dusk. Within weeks, others began contributing to the lore, grainy security footage of a blurred silhouette in backyards, children's drawings of a stick-thin man with too many joints in his limbs, even fake police reports uploaded to image boards. The genius of Slender Man wasn't just his design. It was how he weaponized the internet's hive mind. Every pixelated photo, every shaky found footage YouTube video added another layer to his legend until he didn't feel like fiction at all. What makes this phenomenon so fascinating is how it mirrors traditional myth-making, just accelerated to hyperspeed. Ancient cultures took centuries to refine their monsters. The internet spawned one in months. Yet Slender Man shares uncanny DNA with his folkloric ancestors. His elongated limbs echo the wandering shadows of Celtic myth. His tendency to stalk children parallels the Baba Yaga's hunger for the young. Even his facelessness feels ripped from Korean Daljul Gwishin tales. The key difference, instead of whispers around a campfire, his stories spread through viral tweets and ARG's alternate reality games, where participants pretended to investigate his appearances, leaving coded messages in forum threads for others to decipher. The darkest twist came when fiction bled into reality. In 2014, two 12-year-old girls in Wisconsin stabbed a classmate, claiming Slender Man told them to do it. Suddenly, the internet's playful monster had real-world consequences, forcing uncomfortable questions about how myths shape behavior. Psychologists noted how the girls' descriptions mirrored classic foley, a shared delusion fueled by the endless echo chamber of online horror. Yet even this tragedy couldn't kill Slender Man. If anything, it cemented his place in modern mythology, proving that digital folklore could carry the same psychological weight as stories passed down through generations. Today, Slender Man lingers in the internet's subconscious. He's been spotted in TikTok glitches, Reddit creepypasta revivals, and indie horror games where players navigate forests while their camera batteries mysteriously drain. His persistence reveals something primal. No matter how advanced our technology, we still crave monsters that lurk just beyond the screen's edge. The pixels may change, but the fear remains the same, the dread of something watching from the dark, faceless and patient, adapting to every new era's nightmares. Slender Man isn't just a myth for the digital age. He's proof that the eternal night never truly ends. It just learns to code. there's a reason these chilling myths cling to the night. Our own minds are wired to transform darkness into a canvas for our deepest fears. Scientists studying sleep paralysis have uncovered a startling truth. That terrifying sensation of being pinned down by an unseen force isn't just fodder for ghost stories. It's a biological glitch, a misfire between wakefulness and REM sleep that ignites primal panic. Brain scans during episodes reveal the amygdala, the fear center flaring like a distress beacon, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical thought, remains eerily quiet. This neural tug-of-war births visions as vivid as reality. In Newfoundland, it's the old hag pressing on your chest. In Japan, it's the kanashibari spirit binding your limbs. Different cultures, same terror, proof that night myths are less about monsters and more about the human mind unraveling in the void. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow archetype takes this further, suggesting darkness acts as a mirror for everything we suppress by daylight. The shadow isn't just personal, it's collective, a reservoir of societal taboos and inherited trauma. Consider how often night creatures embody forbidden desires. The Pontianac's rage against patriarchal violence, the Lilitu's predatory sexuality, the Dybbuk's invasion of sacred identity. These aren't random horrors, they're manifestations of what daylight morality demands we ignore. Jungian analysts point to recurring motifs, teeth, claws, grasping hands, as symbols of repressed aggression, while the pervasive theme of stolen breath mirrors universal anxiety about life's fragility. Yet darkness does more than reveal fear, it reshapes perception itself. Studies at the University of Toronto found that dim lighting heightens sensitivity to ambiguous sounds, making rustling leaves morph into footsteps or wind into whispers. This signal detection theory explains why cultures worldwide describe night spirits with eerily similar auditory details. The Banshee's wail, the Jarachwai ribbon's keening, the Skinwalker's impossible vocal mimicry. Our brains, starved of visual data in low light, become overeager pattern seekers, stitching randomness into narratives. Anthropologists call this agent detection, the instinct to assign intention to unexplained phenomena, a survival mechanism turned myth-making engine. Perhaps most fascinating is how these stories persist despite electric lights and scientific explanations. fMRI scans show that even when we know better, ancient brain regions still react to darkness as our ancestors did. The same neural pathways that once kept hunter-gatherers alert for predators now flood social media with creepy videos of empty hallways or static-filled ghost hunts. Modern horror films leverage this hardwired dread through techniques like sensory deprivation scares, sudden silences, or pitch-black frames that trigger involuntary panic. It's as if every smartphone and streetlight can't quite overwrite the primal code that whispers, "Something watches from beyond the firelight." The night's true power lies in this duality. It's both a psychological crucible and a cultural echo chamber where individual neurology meets centuries of storytelling. We don't just fear the dark, we collaborate with it, spinning communal tales from shared biology. Whether through sleep paralysis demons or Jungian shadows, the message remains the same. When the sun vanishes, so too does our illusion of control. And in that vulnerable space between reality and perception, the eternal night's oldest residents awaken, not from haunted forests or crumbling tombs, but from the uncharted wilderness within us all. Bram Stoker's notes for Dracula reveal just how deeply folklore seeped into literature. His early drafts included references to Romanian strigoi and Greek varikolokas, creatures that predated the vampire we know today by centuries. He pored over Transylvanian travelogues, scribbling phrases like Nosferatu from Emily Gerard's accounts, a word borrowed from Slavic Nesuvatu, meaning the unclean one. These weren't just names, they were threads pulled from a tapestry of night terrors woven across cultures. Even Dracula's shape-shifting abilities echo the pricklish eye of Wallachia, while his aversion to mirrors mirrors Hungarian tales of Ledeasi spirits, whose reflections revealed their true, grotesque forms. Stoker didn't invent horror, he distilled it, bottling centuries of whispered fears into a single, iconic monster. Hollywood's golden age took these myths and electrified them. Universal's Frankenstein borrowed not just from Mary Shelley, but from German doppelganger lore and Jewish golem legends, stitching them together like the creature itself. The film's iconic laboratory scene, its crackling lightning and rising gurney owe as much to medieval alchemy as they do to Shelley's prose. Even the creature's flat-topped head was inspired by phrenology sketches of criminal skulls, a pseudoscience rooted in Gothic fears of inherited corruption. Meanwhile, the Wolfman's tragic Larry Talbot drew from Welsh blade deed in tales where cursed men wore wolf pelts not for power but penance. These films didn't just adapt myths, they remixed them, turning regional folktales into a shared nightmare for the modern age. Look up at the night sky and you'll find myths etched in starlight. The constellation Draco isn't just a serpent, it's the Norse Jörmungandr, the Babylonian Tiamat, and the Greek Ladon, all coiled into one celestial pattern. Arabic astronomers named the red star Algol the demon's head, linking it to Medusa's gaze, while the Chinese saw Tanlong, the celestial wolf, prowling the Milky Way. Even Pluto's moon Charon borrows from the ferryman of Greek myth, a silent guide through the cosmic underworld. These names aren't arbitrary, they're proof that humanity's oldest stories still map our universe, turning random stars into epic characters. When the Hubble telescope captured the pillars of creation, it wasn't just science, it was Yggdrasil reborn as nebula dust, the eternal night's imagery stretching into the infinite. Theatre, too, has danced with these shadows for centuries. The Phantom of the Opera's unmasking scene channels the visceral horror of Japanese Nopera bow faceless ghosts, while Sleep No More's immersive Macbeth adaptation borrows the Banshees Willing Chinese letter. Even children's stories aren't immune. Where the wild things are roots, it's wild things in Pacific Northwest basket ogress legends. Their claws and rolling eyes plucked straight from Kwakwa transformation masks. These adaptations aren't mere references, they're continuations, proving that myths don't fade, they evolve, slipping into new mediums like moonlight through a keyhole. Gaming culture has become the latest cauldron for these ancient fears. The Witcher 3 Leshen, with its antlered skull and command of wolves, is a near-perfect digital replica of Slavic Leshy forest spirits. Bloodborne's Great Ones twist Lovecraft's cosmic horror into something even older. Their writhing forms recall Mesopotamian Tiamat and Maori Taniwa, gods so vast they blur into landscape. Even indie darlings like Hollow Knight draw from Mayan Aluxob, tiny spirit guardians whose mischief mirrors the game's quirky NPCs. These aren't Easter eggs, they're reinventions, proving that a well-told myth can outlast empires, migrating from campfire tales to pixelated quests without losing its power to unsettle. Perhaps the most surprising legacy lies in medicine. The word nightmare itself comes from the Mara of Slavic myth, her suffocating weight now recognized as sleep paralysis. Doctors studying Cotard's syndrome, where patients believe they're dead, note its eerie parallel to Draugr legends of sentient corpses. Even modern phobias echo these stories. The fear of doppelgangers manifests as Capgra's delusion, while clinical lycanthropy sees patients convinced they transform into beasts. Science may have replaced superstition, but the human brain still conjures the same archetypes, dressed in new terminology. The Eternal Night's creatures never truly left, they just relocated from folklore to textbooks, waiting to be rediscovered. From Stoker's scribbled notes to the constellations above us, these myths have proven more than stories. They're the language of our collective unconscious. Every time a filmmaker lights a vampire's eyes like embers, or a gamer hears the rustle of invisible wings in a haunted forest level, they're participating in a tradition older than writing itself. The shadows haven't changed, only the screens we project them onto. From the icy whispers of the Kalupalik to the digital dread of Slender Man, these myths reveal something fundamental about us, not just our fears, but our need to name the unknowable. Every culture, every era has painted its nightmares onto the darkness, transforming the night into a theater of the imagination. Whether it's the Banshee's wail or the Skinwalker's chilling mimicry, these stories are more than campfire tales. They're survival mechanisms, cautionary fables, and sometimes mirrors reflecting our deepest anxieties. The Raven Mocker preys on our fear of mortality. The Pontianak embodies the trauma of maternal loss. Even in our modern world of streetlights and science, the shadows still stir with whispers of the ancient and uncanny. What's truly remarkable is how these legends persist, adapting to new contexts while keeping their eerie essence intact. The same primal dread that once had villagers nailing shut their windows now has us double-checking locks during late-night scrolling sessions. The monsters may wear different faces, a faceless corporate drone in a creepypasta, a glitch in a security feed, but the heartbeat of the myth remains. The night doesn't just hide monsters, it invites us to create them, to populate the unknown with shapes that make the chaos feel navigable. So here's the challenge for you. What lurks in your local darkness? Every town has its version of the eternal night, the abandoned house at the end of the street, the stretch of woods where dogs refuse to walk, the urban legend passed down in hushed tones at sleepovers. Share yours in the comments, because the truth is, humanity's oldest stories are still being written, rewritten, and whispered into existence. As the moon dips below the horizon, its pale light fading like the embers of a dying fire, remember this: the night will always belong to the storytellers. And maybe, just maybe, to the things that watch from the edges, waiting for their turn to step into the light. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.